absolute garbage.
I'm the trash man.
Hello friends, and welcome back to ReddX, your source for the freshest daily Reddit content anywhere on the internet. Promise, swearsies, it's science, just look it up. Today we are jumping back, of course, into r/NeckbeardStories. Hooray! And this is one giant story about a beard known only as Artbeard. Posted by user Rainbow Quartz. It's taken a while to come together. I think there might even be a final part to it, but I just can't wait any longer. So we are going to dive into this thing head first, and we'll see how it goes. The Chronicles of Artbeard, Part 1. This is my first time making a post on Reddit. So this is a story about a neckbeard I went to college with in art. I don't think I can cover all the information in one part, so I'll probably divide this into several parts. For privacy reasons, the names have been changed, and the fun casting includes OP, a now graduated art student that just loves watching things fall apart. Feel that. Sam, another art student about to graduate, and close ally, often was with me during these shenanigans. And of course, Artbeard, the man, the myth, the legend himself. So I went to a private religious college for art and graphics. It sucked overall, and I did get the degree, but there was one part that was incredibly entertaining, and that is what that is a good chunk of the students, called the Chronicles of Artbeard, where we would track things that this guy had done, or just daily parts of his life, because watching him in action was truly a sight to behold. Sure, it was a little pathetic sometimes, but after repeated attempts to help him, you just can't feel sorry for him. I promise, the more trouble he causes himself is purely his own fault. Artbeard is an almost 30-year-old man who I would describe as overweight, shaggy, greasy, brown-haired individual with a disgusting giant cyst on the side of his head that he refuses to get taken care of. He should buy it a little hat. Talking about his beard, he had very little, mostly just patchy, scraggly jaw hair and a mustache, but not insane like some. The main thing is that nasty-ass cyst that he had on his head. There's plenty of strong photo evidence both Sam and I have seen that proves he's a hoarder, and his hygiene is obvious from this. From the photos of his art he posts to Facebook, you can clearly see in the background of the photo just how bad his living conditions are. His apartment has roughly 4 to 5 cats, trash is scattered everywhere with greasy cardboard boxes, a stained carpet that looks absolutely disgusting, and probably's never been even vacuumed. It's like this guy could have his own Hoarders episode because it is nasty AF. But it gets better because another person, another graduate of the art program, has an account of when he finally moved out of the apartment. A coworker decided to move and ended up renting this apartment that had previously been rented by guess who? Well, when she moved in, the place was trashed. Carpet was holey, moldy, and hadn't been vacuumed probably the entire time he lived there. There were holes in the walls and doors, plus he had painted strange eyeball symbols and abstract colors and shapes all over the doors and even some of the walls. The owner of the building replaces the floors and doors, patched the walls, etc., but nothing could compare to the first night she spent in that lair that Artbeard had vacated. Upon opening the closet, she found the biggest, almost bloody-looking eyeball in the back corner. It was kind of hard to see, but she was clearly scared, so she covered it and went to lay down for the night. Upon turning off the lights, she was greeted with the final horror. Strange splatters and symbols and eyeballs were painted floor to ceiling in glow-in-the-dark paint. She didn't sleep much that night. Now, Artbeard didn't stink like a sewer like a lot of cliché neckies do. He wouldn't even stink up a room that he walked in, but I never got too close, just to be sure. People also reported that he had very bad oral hygiene, and it was pretty obvious that he rarely took a shower. Artbeard also worked at the local Papa John's, and that's going to get its own chapter. Artbeard has some characteristics that do define him as a neckbeard, although he isn't quite as bad towards women. He is in fact married. His wife, who I'll refer to as Artleg, the Artlegbeard, was not much better either, but that's a whole different story. Still, I would put Artbeard into the category of neckbeard purely for his sense of entitlement, general disconnect from normal social behaviors, an affinity toward anime and swords, and explosiveness when not getting his way. Sounds fairly accurate to me, OP. The first conversation I had with him and Artleg is vague to me now, but it was low-key obvious he was somewhat mentally disabled. Maybe he had like Asperger's? He's of sound mind as far as we can tell, so he could definitely comprehend stuff. I saw Artbeard on and off throughout my freshman year. He could often be seen walking around campus in a large Akatsuki Naruto robe while having his phone blasting Linkin Park, sometimes a kawaii face mask, and on one occasion I actually saw him carrying a katana. I don't think that lasted because I'm pretty sure someone reported him because he never carried it around again, more than likely due to campus safety. Other students have said that he always carries around pocket knives. Then in the spring semester, I ended up having 2 classes with him, and holy hell, the cringe is real. To give a little information about the school, this was not an official art school, just a private general college. So that means in art terms that anyone could join the art department. If you go to art-based schools, you have to apply with a portfolio and be approved based on your skill. This college, however, did not work that way. So people like Artbeard were allowed in. Hell yeah, dude, pay to play. A seriously important note that we had not figured out until later was that he had actually been going to this college since early 2013. I started this college in 2016, and as of 2020, he is still going there. And he's still a sophomore. Dude has to have some ridiculous debt because he finally lost financial aid at some point due to failing so much stuff. But he says, "I won't give up on my dream to become an artist." He's really good at painting eyeballs. Easily the thing that made my blood pressure rise was taking classes with Artbeard. Jesus fucking Christ. The one thing that made me want to scream was when this motherfucker raised his hand. He would raise his hand in the middle of a lecture and then just ask the most randomest shit ever. And of course, he was a gamer, so during graphic design class, every time he rose his hand during the lectures, he would often interrupt the teacher, ask a question that wasn't related to the subject, or make a point that was often completely false. The peak of this was in my aesthetics class. This class was almost 95% discussion-based, to my great sadness. We would read out of our book, write stuff down, and then have an in-class discussion. We would go around the room and each person would talk about something that we noticed or learned in the chapter, and the class would discuss points. This was hell at times, because Artbeard would raise his hand 50 million times to either talk about a video game, how he wanted to work for Blizzard, or he would throw out art terminology words that he did not understand. No joke. When he would raise his hand, it felt like I was in Mob Psycho 100 because my irritation would just go 1, 26, 73. Anger boiled up so much that Sam would watch me and laugh to himself because this guy could kill all of your brain cells with how fucking stupid he was. I never directly confronted him on it, but one time he went to raise his hand and I think the aura of Satan himself must have possessed me because I remember looking up with the most hate possible filling my heart. Anger seething out of my eyeballs as I glared directly into his eyes. I wanted him to know how much I wanted to push him into a pit with my aura. And it must have worked because he slowly lowered his hand that time and said nothing. But sadly, this did not end the shenanigans. That's a very neckbeardy paragraph from the OP. Artbeard did not reserve this just for art stuff, though. He was also reported by many others that he would debate and argue with teachers in all his other subjects, and the account of Sam goes as following. Chemistry was one class that I knew I was going to hate, but when I found out Artbeard was going to be in the class with me, I knew it was going to be far worse. You see, Artbeard considers himself something of a science man. He knows all the knowledge on how black holes work, the elements, and on his own account, how to make water not water. Every time this dude raised his hand, he would always interrupt the teacher. And no, I don't mean asking 1 or 2 questions sometimes. I mean, and I literally counted, an average of asking her something like 40 times every class period, and he'd try to get super deep with his ridiculous questions, or asked about something that even a second grader would know is not possible. One of them being where he thought it was possible to create a new element just because he thought he could, which had the professor visibly baffled by what he was trying to say. Artbeard, of course, believes that he is absolutely right with this, because he thinks he knows chemistry better than a professor who has dedicated the majority of her life to learning everything there is to study on chemistry, right? It wasn't just me. Pretty much everyone in the class saw Artbeard as Ronald McDonald, saying that steel is magnetic and we just don't know it, Or how black holes can open up more gateways to more black holes and more universes and shit like that. I mean, he has been in school for 7 years, guys. I wouldn't discount him quite yet. I'll be blunt. Artbeard has the worst art I have ever seen. Looking at his art fills you with a sense of pure, unfiltered cringe. I know people like to embellish their stories on here, but I am being 100% dead serious when I say that his art looked like pure trash. And not even the one man's trash is another man's treasure trash. Just absolute garbage.
I'm the trash man.
I seriously mean it when I say a 5-year-old could draw better with their foot. Because the foot of a 5-year-old probably has more creativity and skill than Artbeard ever will. We can't even classify him as an artist without insulting the general population. It's just that bad. I'd like to see some of OP's art. His paintings look like he just took a shit all over the canvas, because when he mixes the paint, he makes mud with the colors, meaning he lacks a basic understanding of color theory. And his wrist is so hard on the lines, you would think that he would inevitably physically break the pencil with how hard he's pressing. For every art thing Artbeard would make, he would unart. What? Bro, his damn sketchbook had like some mad weird shit in it too. And when we did sketchbook assignments, we had to present them so everybody always got out the popcorn because the shit this guy would draw was absolutely hilarious to see. Yes, and then we move on to critiques. For non-art people, there's a huge difference between a critique and a criticism. A critique is a detailed analysis and evaluation of a work of art. No two people will experience the same reaction to a piece, but by having group discussion in an educational setting, the point of them was to improve, while also sharpening the mind on understanding of what makes good art. Criticism is just being rude without reasoning in art discussion. So, an example of criticism:
I don't like the way it looks because I think it looks stupid.
An example of critique: I don't like the way you did the layout of this drawing. It's not balanced. For Artbeard, whether it be students or teachers, when people would point out blatant mistakes, he would always respond with,
"Oh, I know it is." Or, "Well, that was part of my plan."
Or when people would point out ways to improve the drawings, it was,
"I was thinking about doing that, but I decided to do this instead."
Criticism isn't always rude, OP. It's constructive criticism, come on now. Always an excuse, or deflecting. There was no real helping him improve because he believed he already knew everything, or whatever anybody said was somehow
already always in his plan.
His plan to make these insanely shitty drawings, it seems. End of part 1. TLDR. I don't know, bro. It seems to me like Artbeard's art is getting some sort of reaction, which is like the point of all art, isn't it? I mean, usually the reaction you want is like, awe, wonder. But I mean, going for comedy, that's not a problem either. Artbeard should start up a webcomic with his weirdly drawn sketches, and I bet he'd kill it. The internet loves weird shit. That's why NeckbeardStories are so popular. OP is just looking to cringe at something. I mean, honestly, like I said earlier, I would like to see OP's art. Let's compare the two in a blind test, and let's see which one the general public seems to prefer, you know? Really great art is made by putting a piece of yourself into it, so if you don't have these educational walls up, I think you'd be able to make better art. But then again, I'm not an artist, so take that with a grain of salt. But anyways, let's get into part number 2 of Artbeard. The Chronicles of Artbeard Part 2, the Sophomore Review, the second and last chance. Now that we have the introduction finished, we can start to go in depth as to why Artbeard is a shitty person. For those with a lot of natural sympathy who read part 1, you might think I'm being a little harsh towards him, but the reason you should not feel sorry for him is because of several reasons. The first that sets us upon this path is the Sophomore Review incident. At this college, they have what is called the Sophomore Review. It functions similarly with majors like music in a similar fashion. When you take so many credit hours, you're given an evaluation at sophomore level, and it's determined by a board of teachers whether the quality of your performance is good enough to continue, take upper level courses, become a junior, etc. When taking this test, you have 2 chances to pass. If you fail it twice, you can no longer be an art major, only an art minor. Now, the chances of passing this evaluation are pretty high, as long as you take good care of your artwork, don't let it get bent in the corners and have bad smudges, and as long as you do somewhat okay at art, you're very likely to pass. The main reasons people usually don't pass are in order of most likely. 1. They were late or didn't show up. 2. They didn't have enough work. The comfortable number is about 10 to 14 pieces of art. Usually it's the first one. In fact, about 95% of the students who fail this test twice more than likely just did not show up to the evaluation at all, both times. And the second reason, not having enough stuff to show, like having 7 things instead of 12. In order to not pass because of lack of skill, you have to be pretty bad at art, because the teachers are very lenient. So, I had already taken my own sophomore review the year prior, and Artbeard had his first try the same year as well. Well, no surprise, he did not pass. I assume there are many reasons why he did not pass on the first try, but number 1 was probably how bad his work was. Like I emphasized in part 1, his work was absolutely horrendous. Elementary school children could probably draw better than Artbeard. And with that, the next year rolled around, and his second try came up. This is the part of the tale that shows some of Artbeard's shitty behavior. So it was the week before the review. I was doing my own little thing, drowning in classes, being depressed, usual college student business. Since I had already passed my review, I was a certified junior, and during painting class, Artbeard came up to me and asked me to help him out with preparing for his review. And I'm not an asshole, so I was like, sure bud, I don't mind helping you out. Although I have a very intense schedule, so we need to meet at a certain time, and it has to be at that time. I made sure to drill it into his head that whatever time we set, it had to be that time, because I was pulling around 18 credit hours, and 18 credit hours with almost all art courses, including being a full-time marching band student, there's basically no extra time for me. So we set a time, 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. on Monday. I planned this because at 11 a.m. I had an art history test. I figured that would work and would give us plenty of time to review absolutely everything. 1 hour? I, in fact, had already looked at his work once before and mentioned cleaning the edges of his paintings because they were really messy, to which he replied his usual excuses.
Oh, I know.
And weirdly he said,
He didn't think he could do it because of how heavy his hands were.
My hands are too heavy. Okay. Not really an excuse, but okay. Anywho, 10 a.m. on Monday rolls around. I head to the art building to get some last-second cramming for the test with Sam. 10 a.m. No Artbeard. 10:30. Nope. 10:55. And with that, he never showed up. I headed to the class and took that test, no reviewing with Artbeard, even though I had set aside an hour of my time just for him. The studying part was just convenient. I probably wouldn't have studied if I didn't go to the art building, to be honest, lol. So after my test, my next class, painting, rolls around, the class that I have with Artbeard. The moment I step foot in the door, Artbeard strolls right up to me.
Hey, redacted. You gonna help me review my stuff now?
I paused and tilted my head at him in confusion. Huh? What do you mean? We set aside that time for this morning to review and you never showed. That was the only free time I had, bro. I won't have time after class to do it. I had marching band almost immediately as soon as the class was over. He didn't say anything at first. I took my seat at my desk and started working on the assignment. Well, I guess being told no was not the thing he wanted to hear, because within the next couple minutes he started grumbling like a male Karen to himself, like the entire class couldn't hear him. He started mumbling to himself like a little man-child.
Can't trust anybody. Nobody ever helps me with anything. I gotta do everything myself.
This fucking was sitting there grumbling and blaming me for not showing up during the only free time that I had, like it's somehow my fault. Thankfully, the teacher, who we will call Sweet Grandma Molasses, SGM for short, who's an ultimate cinnamon bun, had not walked into the class yet. I know people always say things like, well, if he had done one more thing, then I could have went AWOL. But this went on for about 10 minutes, and when I finally looked over to my friend, who we'll call Lauren, I'm naming her here because she has her own experiences with Artbeard, and I said to her very quietly, if this motherfucker says one more thing, I'm going to go off and embarrass him in front of this whole class. But strangely, it was like as if at this Christian college campus, God intervened. I don't know if Jesus himself whispered into this guy's mind to shut the fuck up, but all of a sudden he got real quiet. I'm not sure if it was just pure luck or if he somehow heard what I had said to Lauren, but He did shut up, so I let it go. Still, this was a glaringly obvious beginning towards his childish behavior, especially blaming others for his misfortunes, which we will discuss more in part 3. So, the end of the day review arrives, and I gotta admit, Artbeard is very determined. He got a whole ass haircut and dressed up in a fancy button-up shirt and dress pants. Where's the matching fedora? Sam and I were hopeful for Artbeard. It's not like either of us wanted him to fail. He could be a total baby at times, but I didn't wish anything ill on him, and I decided to just forget about the whole incident. We just happened to conveniently be there and decided it would be good to help the other students carry their artwork into the building. We didn't want to see any unfortunate bent paper because a lot of people's stuff wasn't wrapped up, so we both hung around. During this time, I stopped to look at Artbeard's collection that he chose to present and... sigh. Everything was matted, but the work was rough. Pencil drawings that had really unsightly fingerprint smudges, paintings that were pure mud, but I noticed something different. In his pile of stuff was a box, specifically the box project from 3D Design. The point of the box project was to create something nice inside a random box, made of wood and sometimes with a door, typically with something that you think is important to you or a place that's important to you. Sam and I recall when doing this project, we had made a scene of a beach because of memories or some shit. The point is that you have to create something inside the box. This guy, this dude, this Artbeard, he filled the box with action figures. No sculpting, no painting, just action figures that he happened to have. I was stunned. He couldn't be serious. There's no fucking way this guy is going to present a box filled with stuff that he didn't make. It would be art suicide. Copyright and usage rights are big no-nos to avoid. I looked at him. Artbeard, are you putting this in your show? He looked at it and perked up.
Well, yeah, of course I am. It even has little lights in it.
He reaches over and hits the on switch, and there are a couple of little Christmas lights in the box that flash on. While cute, this was still very bad. You can't present something with media that you didn't make. But I wasn't there to be his mother. Still, I did try to stop him. I tried to make it overwhelmingly obvious. Are you sure that you want to put that in? It's got things in it that you didn't specifically make. But Artbeard was having none of it. He was all confidence that this show was going to blow the teachers away. I would even learn down the line that the teacher he did the assignment for, the same teacher who was also one of the people judging him in this evaluation, told him not to put this project in his presentation. I tried to carefully tell him not to put it in the show, but Artbeard knew everything according to him, because nothing I said deterred him. I looked at Sam, and we both exchanged a look of knowing, and both shook our heads and went in. We carried his stuff in, and another project he had was a grassy mountain range made out of boots. For that assignment, you had to take a pair of shoes and make them into an environment. What? The fake grass glued on the boots kept shedding everywhere, all over the table. I was as gentle as physically possible, and Artbeard had the nerve to criticize me to
not get the stuff everywhere.
Even though this was his project. This project was so fickle that pieces fell off of it even with the most careful touch. I doubt him and his extremely heavy hands could have been more careful than I was with his stuff. In fact, I would bet you money on the table it would have been far worse if he was the one that had carried it in. After everything was set up, both Sam and I left him to his evaluation. Only the student getting evaluated and the teachers were allowed in. The results were not immediate. They normally announce the results a week later, and whoo boy, it was not pretty. End of part 2, TLDR. I wonder if there actually were just like shitty action figures in the box, or if they were like those anime figurines that are like $300 each. Either way, it's not going to make a difference. Copyright usage and such. But yeah, OP probably should have told him flat out, like, dude, this is going to be the reason that you fail. Do not put it in. I mean, he was able to wire up lights in the box, stuff like that. So maybe he should be an electrician instead of an artist. I know I probably couldn't do that. I'm terrible with electricals. Apart from flipping a circuit breaker, I'll call an electrician every single time. OP does seem nicer in this part of the story. You know, he tries to help out and stuff, but This guy needs more than just a helping hand. You gotta lead him around, you know? But I mean, OP's also right in a way, you know, you can lead a horse to water, but try to make him drink, you know? Some people are just stuck so far up their own asses. And maybe, just maybe, this is all for the best, you know? He fails it the second time. Can't get an art major anymore. He has to go into an art minor. So good. Just put him out of his misery, you know? Somebody had to shoot old Yeller. But anyways, let's jump into part 3 and see just how bad the results are. The Chronicles of Artbeard, part 3. The Fallout, Crushed Dreams, and Endless Memes. After the review was over for the day, both Sam and I waited with bated breath for the results. Sam was always my greatest pal during my endeavors of this shitty art department, so we both had strong mutual understanding that this was going to be a shitstorm when they announced the results. It does seem like a shitty art department, doesn't it? They're like, put a scene in a box, make a environment out of shoes. What? Then again, maybe it's better than drawing a fruit basket or some shit like that. You really can't teach art. You either have a proclivity or you don't. Otherwise, you go into art history or something. Anyways, I digress. Now, normally, they do announce the results, usually writing the people's names who passed on a sheet of paper and putting it out in the lobby for everybody to see. However, this time, they must have decided that it would be wise to tell each student individually, probably to not embarrass anyone this time, because this time we had a higher turnout of failure. Like I said in part 2, the main reason students failed was because they literally didn't show up. We had 3 who physically never showed up, so no surprise why they failed, and for one of them, this was his second try. His art really sucked too, though, if I'm being honest, just a little better than Artbeard. Funny thing I didn't mention, Sam was also one of the people who was getting evaluated that semester, now that I recall, because I had originally shown up to help him carry stuff in, then we both opted to help carry other stuff. I digress. Oh, how the turntables. The day had come. Each student went alone into Sweet Grandma Molasses' office. Doesn't sound very intimidating. Sweet Grandma Molasses was, at the time, the head of the art department, and the students were given their results. Sam, of course, passed, but stuck behind to watch the fallout. I was not there to witness it because I had something else to attend to, but he relayed all the information of how it went down. When Artbeard stepped out of the office, he looked pretty dejected. He didn't say anything, but he ran out of the art building like a character running away in an anime, and Sam could see that he was crying. Honestly, even now, I do feel slightly bad for Artbeard. It has to suck getting your dreams crushed, even if you'll probably never amount to anything related to it in the long run. It was that same day, actually, that I spoke with the wife of one of the teachers who had evaluated him, as we were pretty good friends. When speaking with her, she confirmed what both Sam and I had thought. She said while her husband did feel bad about it, it would be kinda cruel to let Artbeard pass, and unfair to the other students who worked so hard. Cruel because even if Artbeard did somehow, by the miracle of Jesus, graduate, there is no way that he would ever get a job in the art industry. The only people who could possibly want to hire him would have to be blind and deaf. Artbeard certainly could never get a job working in a gallery, greeting, and definitely not exhibiting. You see, even a casual conversation with Artbeard would make you feel uncomfortable. Trust me on this one. So, in the majority opinion of the art population at this school, it was much wiser to not let him through. It's cruel to let someone continue when they have no real way of succeeding. On top of that, the department has to maintain a level of quality because the work is representing a college after all, and Artbeard is nowhere even close to a minuscule amount of good standard. It almost makes you feel sorry for him. Almost. Because when he stepped outside, Artleg was there to meet him, and that sadness quickly turned into unbridled rage. Artbeard started screaming his head off about how
Sweet Grandma Molasses had discriminated against him.
And that was the real reason that he failed the review, and believe me, it was not a moderate yell, it was a full-blown screech. Artbeard was yelling at the top of his lungs about how he had been
cheated on something horrible.
And how
Sweet Grandma Molasses had it out for him because he was dyslexic.
And that she was somehow the real reason that this had happened. As a side note, Sweet Grandma Molasses is the sweetest old woman you will ever meet. Like, she is so kind and gentle and constantly caring about your well-being, and no, she did not have it out for Artbeard, obviously. She was just kind of there to be the mental punching bag. Artbeard did not let this go. In fact, you could almost say he was a sore loser about it. Thus began the era of, as Sam likes to call it, the Sweet Grandma Molasses era, because almost every single day, Artbeard was constantly blaming all of his misfortunes on Sweet Grandma Molasses. Artbeard had now grown a personal vendetta against the art department that had wronged him, and he wanted to make sure that everyone knew exactly how he felt. Sure, it's okay to be upset that things didn't go well, but Artbeard had no accountability in this story. If I'm being blunt, he was set up to fail from the beginning with his unwillingness to learn, his know-it-all attitude, and his general disregard for how reality actually works. But now isn't the time for reasoning. Now is the time for anger! Because the thing that happened next was in painting class the very next day. We all came to class as normal, and that day an assignment was due. So Sweet Grandma Molasses told us to put all of our work up against the wall in a stack near the door. This was a landscape painting, I believe, and everyone went and put their stuff up, everyone except Artbeard. His painting, which was rough, and conveniently it was sitting near the wall. He had not brought it up to be turned in, but it was somehow near the stack of paintings the students had brought up to turn in. There were naturally lots of paintings up against the wall. Most students would put them up to dry, so it wasn't that unusual. So Sweet Grandma Molasses had already taken the work that was finished. Remember, I said finished, when she noticed that Artbeard's painting was sitting against the door. Well, she accidentally picked up Artbeard's work because she thought he was done with it. And instead of saying like, "I'm sorry, I haven't completed this yet, my bad," haha, this motherfucker gets heated and yells out,
"I'm not finished with it yet!"
You could hear a pin drop in that class. It was so quiet. Everyone just silently stared at Artbeard, some of their mouths agape. Sweet Grandma Molasses didn't really give a fuck, but went, "Alrighty," and set the painting back down, and went to her office to grade our work. Since she was gone, Artbeard wasted no time to go on a mini rant to the other students, who tried very hard to ignore his presence completely. He was so mad, saying, mostly out loud to himself again,
"This was a prime example of Sweet Grandma Molasses trying to set him up for failure since he wasn't done with his shit."
This, of course, annoyed many, and made the ire boil up in the other students, because this son of a bitch was talking shit about our grandma. Nobody said anything, but if you read the room, you could cut through the tension with a knife. Sweet Grandma Molasses then returned to the class about 30 minutes later, and I can't remember what was said to get Artbeard talking to her, but she said at one point, "Okay, why didn't you let me know you were finished? I was only collecting finished stuff." And since of course he had no backup, Artbeard Window XP crashed as logic did not compute in his tiny brain. Now, it should be mentioned that this was near the end of the semester, so everyone was cramming at the last minute to try and get their art finished for their final grades. This meant that in the painting room, there were a lot of paintings laid around the room to dry. Artbeard had another piece of work lying almost in the middle of the walkway, and yes, he could have easily put it out of the walkway. You see, someone accidentally stepped on Artbeard's painting. It was Sam, and he was way too scared to tell us, so he just dipped when all this happened. It wasn't a horrible footprint, not painfully obvious. In fact, a lot of us didn't even notice until someone pointed it out. That alone should tell you how messy and rough his work is. And at this, Artbeard started flipping his shit, screaming again how
"Someone did this on purpose!"
He started yelling profanities, demanding to know
"Who did this?"
when another art teacher walked in and said that he needed to be quiet because she was having a class next door and he was disrupting that class. Artbeard was not listening though. He was blinded by rage and continued to rant about
how this shit always happens to him.
And she told him, "Okay, I get that, but you really need to calm down." This teacher was a real asshole, but I admit I will applaud her ability to get him to calm down for 10 seconds. Artbeard then stormed out of the art building. We were all about to leave anyways, so we trailed out after him. I went outside first to find that Art Leg was there to meet him, and he was back to yelling again. Art Leg looked low-key tired of his antics, but she was still trying to calm him down. I yeeted myself out of there and went home. So yeah, that's a good chunk of that part of the saga. Artbeard caused himself more pain and delusion by blaming everything on someone else, never really taking accountability for his laziness, and treating others like crap when things didn't go his way. End of part 3, TLDR. This is the part that turned it all around. Just like the first part, I'm like, why is OP ripping on Artbeard? The second part, I felt kind of bad for him. And then the third part, it's all demonstrated. I'm like, oh god, what a douche. He reaps what he sows, you know what I mean? This is unacceptable from anyone, but especially to attack a sweet old lady. Don't yell at an old lady, for God's sake, neckbeard scumbag. I would still like some examples of his art just to see how bad it is, but if he couldn't turn it in on time, maybe he was trying his very best, but yeah, sometimes your best isn't good enough. That's just how it be sometimes. The world is cruel, you know? Just taking it all personally for his own lack of talent. Yep, that's that's about par for the course with neckbeards, I suppose. So part 4 might come eventually. It seems to be a removed post at the moment, which is strange, but I'll dump it into one of these videos sooner or later. This video is quite beefy enough, I do think. And if you did enjoy it, friends, I of course hope that you will like, comment, and or subscribe. Check out the links in the description. We got PayPal, you want to make a one-time donation, Patreon for recurring donations, Twitter, Discord, my other channel if you want to reach out and get at me further. And of course, I would like to thank my beautiful, lovely, wonderful patrons. We got Damon Darkstar, Lady Nix, Crimson Albedo, Dot Nathan, Robert Waits, Just Austin, Pope Squid, Rebecca H, the newest boy, Cider Drinker, and the biggest boy, Barlos Bugo. I thank you guys so much for donating and keeping my motivation super high when it comes to making these videos. I had to catch up on some work, so I was going every other day and just making the videos super beefy. But if the channel gets to a certain point and I can take this full time, man, I'll drop hour videos for you guys every single day. And we are well on the way. I am super excited for what's happening with this channel, and I have you guys to thank for it. I got some comments on the last video that were like, is this 1 hour video your way of telling us that you love us? And the answer is yes. I truly do love all my viewers, all my subscribers, all my patrons. This channel would honestly be nothing without you guys watching, so thank you so much. I definitely appreciate you guys for making my day every single day. I will always be in the comments replying and getting to know you a little better. And I thank you just so much for being a part of ReddX. It means the world to me. So with that mushy gush out of the way, I hope you'll join us again tomorrow. Keep yourself safe out there. Don't forget to wash your hands all the time, always. Also do something that you enjoy today. Something just for yourself, because you are loved, you are worthy, and you definitely deserve it. I'll see you in the next one, friends. Until then, bye-bye.